Okay, good afternoon, Dr. Hill. I apologize for all the trouble I'm having with Pinocchio. It's really frustrating. I was doing this for the better part of 3 hours last night, then I eventually fell asleep, and I've been trying to do it all morning. But anyways, this is about I'm giving it another shot. Hopefully, this one works. So this is my. Oh, also, I'm recording in my apartment, and I live off PCH, so you might hear a lot of some background noise from passing traffic. So, anyways, so this is my project one. It's called Goal, Ace, or Swish, and I put a brief presentation. And as I stated in my email, it's essentially all about taking traditional soccer drills and you doing those drills with non soccer balls that aren't soccer balls, so like a basketball or a tennis ball, or even a football or something to that extent. So, onto the first slide. Some background: soccer is the world's most popular sport. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's so easy to play and it's incredibly accessible as well. Uh, in terms of accessibility, for football, baseball, tennis, basketball, hockey, water polo, you need field markers, a basket, you need a net and a court, you need uh, end zones, you need a pool, and just to have a game going. But in soccer, all you really need is something that, some space, a ball, some friends, and two things that you, and or maybe about four things that you can use to set up goals. I can tell you the numerous amount of times that I've played soccer in the middle of the street with my friends, just using goals, some backpacks as goals as goalposts. I've played my whole life, um, pretty much ever since I can remember. And now that I've been a coach for the better part of a year now, I'm always looking for new training methods and always uh, trying to challenge and come up with novel ways to teach soccer skills. I deal with kids as young as 16 months to 14 years of age. At my company, Super Soccer Stars, we teach kids how to play soccer in both competitive and non-competitive environments. Obviously, our younger classes are called kick and play classes. They're for kids, the 16-month-olds to 2-year-olds. Uh, those are essentially the soccer version of a mommy and me class. Basically, kids are learning about their basic motor functions and all of that jazz. But we also have our uh, competitive side. They're a travel club team called the LA Stars, and so I work with both very routinely. So I have to. You can't use the same types of drills that you'd use for with a 2-year-old or 3-year-old with that you would with a 10-year-old. So it definitely, but you want to integrate some of the same concepts, such as the proper form for dribbling and shooting and change of direction and balance. So yeah, you can imagine the type of creative thinking that goes on whenever I'm putting a lesson plan together. Okay, so in relation to my hypothesis is that soccer drills conducted with tennis balls, basketballs, and other non-traditional items can be done effectively and translate to increased soccer skill. That being said, I mentioned in my paper that I had a coach who encouraged us to dribble around a basketball with not with our hands, with our feet, and he really wanted us to kick it, and that way we would be kicking something with increased resistance or increased weight that would act as resistance as well as in, increased density and uh, just different structure. Uh, Soccer or basketballs are a lot harder to play soccer with than soccer balls are, obviously. So his mode of thinking was, if you are able to dribble a basketball, you can dribble a soccer ball in the game, and that those skills would translate over. Uh, when you dribble a soccer ball, much when you play any sport, whether it's swinging a golf club or throwing a football, people often develop heuristics or shortcuts to achieve the same result without having to fully commit to the motion. So, with if you're learning how to dribble or if you're dribbling with a soccer ball, it's easy to do so after tons of practice. You don't have to, for example, I don't exactly have to uh, use my whole foot or use the whole outside or inside of my foot. I can use part of it and do just fine. But with a basketball, since it's so heavy and dense, as compared to a soccer ball, I have to use my whole foot to push it, and I have to also account for its increased weight when I'm kicking it. And so, uh, that being said, I think that working with a soccer ball or a basketball and a tennis ball and other arms could help benefit soccer players because it forces them to execute techniques for juggling, shooting, dribbling in not only the proper manner, but it also forces them to adjust and to uh, fully commit to the motion. So, starting off the research I gathered for uh, this project, the first experiment was done in Brazil by Teixeira et al. In 2003. These guys split up a group of, I believe it was 20 kids. Uh, they had them practice uh, 10 hours a week uh, for 4 months. And they separated them into the strong footed group, so the kids favored their stronger foot, most likely right, since 90% of the population is right footed or right handed, and the weaker group, which was focused on their left foot. And what they found was the weaker group substantially, significantly, um, whichever word you want to use. In this case, we'll use significantly since it is research. Improved the use of their weaker leg, weaker foot, because of the increased emphasis on it. Bear in mind, these kids were in the youth academies for professional soccer teams in Brazil, so they already practiced a lot outside of the required 10 hours a week that they did with the researchers. Not only that, but all of these kids are probably amongst not only the best in the country, but better players in the world in terms of their age group. So obviously, the more you practice at something, if you practice the right way, you're going to get better at it. But I just think it's always nice to have research to back things that you're saying or note popular notions such as that one. In Riley 2007, I believe the study was done in the UK. Researchers had 19-year-old players, give or take in age. He had them perform different parts, the same soccer drills over different parts of the day. It being England, they also accounted for things such as body temperature and uh, they measured different variables of strength, or they took different measurements such as strength and like consistency in touch and other things such as that. Because not only did they want to find the most optimal time to do things, but they also found that, or they also wanted to find is how things like temperature of the environment infected them. What Riley found was that not only was peak performance time between at 1600 hours and 2000 hours, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but in military time, that's in military time, so I believe that's 4 p.m., between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. in standard time. So I think it's a good. Uh, I think that's interesting in terms of when the peak performance time is. Some athletes, or a lot of athletes, uh, probably don't really think about this sort of thing, and I don't know if a lot of coaches do either. And I think this would be, like, say, this could be useful in, say, like, you have your high school coach and you have a weekend tournament coming up, and your games are in the morning. Oh, you have a game in the morning, game in the afternoon, game in the early evening. It could be useful if you structured practice in a way that uh, makes you get it like a start fast and allows you to adjust and tailor practice and encourage your kids to tailor their sleeping patterns or and their habits in a way that conduces to them playing, being able to play well and play consistently earlier in the day as opposed to later in the day, and later in the day. I mean, um, but yeah, this what the last thing that really interested me about this study was the fact that they did take measurements such as like right hand grip strength and compared them to the same test, but just at different parts of the day. I don't think that I'd really ever think of that, but it's I don't know. I just think that's really cool. Thomas 2011. Uh, Thomas sought to find out notational way to monitor soccer skills and their relations to team success. So the subjects were a team of Division One female players, and what Thompson set out to do was he measured the skills, soccer skills such as dribbling, first touch, and passing, heading, shooting, trapping, tactics in amongst the individual players, and then he gathered the data and compared them to the team's wins that season. And what he found was that uh, dribbling, first touch, and passing between individuals to be the three highest skills related to team success. So, in other words, when when players rated highly in dribbling, first touch, and passing in a game, then the more often the players rated highly in those skills in a game, the more likely they were to win. And I think this study is really interesting in the sense that it guides you, or it gives coaches a sort of frame of reference into what skills are more important over others. Not saying that a coach should and a team and a player shouldn't work on every skill. You can always improve your game, but they I would be remiss if I didn't say dribbling was a lot more important than heading a soccer ball. And so I think this type of information would be really useful. I am, however, curious in how it would affect men. So, or how the study would be affected if it were done on men, because when if you were to watch a professional women's game, then compared to a professional men's game, the women's game is a lot more team oriented, and there's a lot bigger emphasis on passing and movement as opposed to the men's side, where there's still a lot of passing and movement. Soccer, it's the nature of the game, but it's a lot more often that you'll see in a men's game a guy taking the ball and then getting past two players and then trying to score. In a women's game, you don't really see that so much. So I wonder if the same skills uh, would measure as highly amongst male players. Ford, researchers divided skilled and less skilled players to focus, and he had them focus on less relevant parts of the body when executing drills, dribbling drills, and focusing on parts of their body such as their arms instead of their feet or their eyes. Researchers found that for the lower skilled players, it was it pretty much forced them to not be able to complete the task, not be able to dribble at all. With the more skilled players, they were able to still somewhat complete the task, but they didn't do it as well as they would if they were just focusing on the ball or on their feet. Uh, they used auto attentional focus cues, and what I found interesting about this study was the fact that in soccer, or when you control a ball, you use your whole body, whether you know it or not. Your arm, if you're controlling a ball with your foot, you're using your eyes, you're using your head, you're using your shoulders, your legs, obviously, your arms are also involved. However, just because the part of the body just because the majority of your body isn't coming in contact with the ball doesn't mean it's not in use. For example, if I were to kick a ball 20 feet in the air, and then I'd have to wait for it to uh, I'd have to use my brain and I have to look up at it and I'd have to uh, position myself so I could fall under it, or so the ball would fall to me, sort of as if when a baseball player catches a long fly ball, they always position it under the ball. And so I have to position myself under the ball, under the trajectory of the ball as it's returning to Earth. But I don't know. And then I have to determine if I'm going to stop it with my head, if I'm going to stop it with my chest, if I'm going to stop it with my knees or my foot. Since, say I'm using my foot, I have to put my arms out for balance. Then I have to raise my leg up, and then I have to really think about when I'm going to cradle the ball back on my foot and then bring it down gently, which would be ideal. You don't want the ball to hit off your foot because then it'll just fly in whichever direction, and you don't want the ball to uh, just you don't want the ball. Well, the worst case scenario is it'll just bounce off your foot, but then you also don't want to completely miss the ball either, because if it just hits the ground, it could go back. If you're in a game and the ball just hits the ground, the other team can get it and they can score or just keep possession of the ball. And so in soccer, it's really important to develop a good touch, but it's also important to uh, be acutely aware. I believe it was kinesthetically aware of what your body is doing whenever you're executing any skill. Um, I had in high school, some of my teammates would call me uh, Ole or Matador because uh, when if you ever see a flamenco dancer or a bullfighter, whenever they raise the red cape, they oftentimes put their arms over their head when they're raising it, or when you see like a flamenco dancer, they oftentimes finish the dance off by raising their right arm over their head and their left arm uh, crossing over their body. And my teammates told me that whenever I would kick a ball really hard, I'd do the same thing with my arms, so I'd look like I was dancing after I kicked it. And so, uh, I don't know, I guess it was part of my technique. It helped. When I shooting, I like to do that in order to keep balance. And so that just worked for me. So some extra fun is I included the videos. One video of Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He's the third best player in the world, juggling a piece of chewing gum. I think you would really enjoy it. It's actually quite humorous. The second one is a video of the F2 Freestylers. They're a pair of YouTubers who have amazing soccer skills. and they teamed up with Barcelona forward Neymar, and they challenged him to juggle an assortment of various household items with his feet. I think you'll quite enjoy both videos. In relations to motor control, so the terms that most came to mind when I was reading this, the research I included in this study, in this project, as well as when I was forming this hypothesis, was first off transferability. I believe that the skills practice in these drills, with dribbling, balance, coordination, etc., are all transferable to a game setting or just a general soccer setting overall. Bilateral practice. All the best soccer players, whether it be Messi or Ronaldo, know how to effectively use both feet. They've made plays, they've scored goals with both of their feet. No one, no, nobody who wants to become a great soccer player, and more often than not is right-footed, gets to a really high level just using a right foot. Of course, there are always exceptions, but the higher the level one plays at, the more often it is, like the more pressure you're gonna experience in terms of being able to use both feet. If you can't use both feet, if you can't execute things such as passing and shooting with both feet, you're gonna get exposed. So it's paramount that these drills are done with both the left and the right foot. Along with being info processing, along with being transferable, all these drills have to challenge the athlete. I don't have to tell you that juggling a soccer ball with my foot is a lot easier than juggling a tennis ball or a basketball. And the good thing about all of these drills is they help the athlete ingrain proper technique into their long-term memories. So just because it's easier to juggle a soccer ball than it is a tennis ball doesn't mean the motion isn't similar, and doesn't mean and the touch required, or the amount of force required is essentially the same. When you're juggling a soccer ball, you don't have to kick it very hard if you want to maintain it. And with a tennis ball, you don't have to kick that very hard either, or else they'll just fly away from you. So again, these drills really help you not only learn proper technique, but how to apply proper force, the proper amount of force necessary to execute these drills. In terms of stages of learning, each of soccer's main skills can be broken down into the stages of learning, when first being learned by a player, and then eventually as the player advances and practice more and more, the skills become more automatic, and they're ingrained into the player's long-term memory. And they don't, like for example, for shooting, you don't want to always be told, after a while, if you keep practicing, you don't always have to be told to land on your kicking foot. For a beginning soccer player, if they're barely learning how to shoot with power, they might need to be told over and over again, hey, land on the same foot you kick the ball with. But with an advanced soccer player, ideally you don't have to remind them of that. So these are my references. Again, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great break. Bye.